Daybell. This is her last Arizona trial. She's accused of conspiring in the attempted murder of her ex-nephew-in-law, Brandon Boudreaux. Brandon, really the lone survivor in this saga. Now, we are getting ready for this trial to hopefully start on June 2nd when opening statements will begin. We are getting ready, though, for today's jury selection questionnaire review. And tomorrow we'll have a pool of jurors that will be brought in person to the courtroom. Right now, I'm joined with my co-host, executive producer of special projects as well, George Obi. We have been doing this for a while now. We went through about a week and a half or so for the trial regarding Charles Vallow. And just to catch you up, Lori Daybell was convicted in the conspiracy to commit murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow, once again representing herself. And I think we know what to expect. But again, we got thrown a curveball today with a last-minute hearing as she tried to get Judge Boreski disqualified.
Yeah, it seems like we've seen a flurry of motions filed by Lori, at least within the last couple of weeks. I don't know if this is a reflection of what she's gone through in the last trial. I don't know if her legal counsel is giving her kind of more fuel to say, look, you can, file for this. You can try and last ditch effort to get a new trial, get the judge off the trial, evidence, kind of, keep evidence out of this latest trial. But again, a flurry of filings in the last couple of weeks. And then, of course, this last minute hearing this morning, as you mentioned, as we get ready to finally nail down a jury for this case and try and get it, finished before the end of June, before Boreski moves on.
Okay, so we got 120 people watching. We don't want to waste your time because we're going to give this about a half hour. We've got our expert panel on right now, and I can't wait to introduce them to you. We have a new guest, though. We'll get to him in a second and why he's important to this case. But first off, Special Prosecutor Rachel Smith, who worked on the Idaho case against Lori Vallow back in 2023, instrumental in that case, in that courtroom. So we welcome her back. Benjamin Taylor, criminal defense attorney here in the Phoenix metro area. And the Judge Mel McDonald, former U.S. attorney, prosecutor as well. Decades of experience. We love to have him in the room. And then finally, Rich Robertson of R3 Investigations, also a former journalist here in the Valley and the private investigator who worked on Brandon Boudreaux's case after he had just been shot at October 2nd, 2019, trying to really give Brandon some reassurance and help as he was fearing for his life at the time. Alex Cox, Lori Daybell's late brother, was alive at the time, and there just was so much going on. And so he got to know Brandon Boudreaux and Kay Woodcock very well. So thank you guys for being here. We appreciate you. First off, I want to start with Rich. Welcome to our panel, being our special guest. You were able to really get inside the mind of Brandon Boudreaux and what he was dealing with back in October 2019. What's it like to see this unfold? And now here we are in the final chapter.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been 6 years since I first met Brandon. Needless to say, the day that I met him, I didn't know him before. He reached out to us, met him. He was in a panic. He was terrified. No one would listen to him. He didn't feel like law enforcement was taking his situation seriously. He was just really frazzled and just was telling me these wild tales of cults and murders. And at that point, this was in early October, as you said. In July is when Charles Vallow had been shot to death. So he was convinced that that was a murder and was being treated as a self-defense case by law enforcement. So he didn't feel like things were happening, and he was afraid. He didn't know where his wife was. He didn't know where Alex Cox was, and he was convinced that Alex Cox was the guy who shot at him. So he just really needed some answers, and so that's why he hired me.
For those who are not privy to this case and maybe have followed it here and there, but not like us, to understand what Brandon Boudreaux went through is traumatizing. This is a guy who was close to Charles Vallow. He was a part of this family. His ex-wife is Melanie Pulowski, who was very, very close to Lori, went to temple with her almost every day, and was, at the time, believing what Lori was teaching via Chad Daybell, the so-called Doomsday Prophet At the same time, Brandon is shot at. Police believe it was Alex Cox and believe that Lori put him up to this, to drive from Idaho back down to Gilbert, Arizona, and to do this at a new home that Brandon was renting. At the same time, Tammy dies weeks later. The kids are missing, and we know now that they were already murdered. Alex dies. And when this is all said and done, and JJ and Tylee are found, Lori's kids are found on the property of Chad Daybell, Brandon had to identify JJ's remains. So you think of that trauma. He's testified in both Idaho trials. He has been through so much. Rachel, talk to me about not only the witness, but the man who is now trying to get justice.
You know, he was one of our first witnesses in the first trial against Lori. He had to do some things that no one should have to do. He was the person who helped identify JJ and Tylee for the jury. He identified Tylee's necklace based on social media posts. That's something that no one should have to do. So his personal experience, where he was a victim largely for his money, the life insurance that we would have expected Melanie Boudreaux to get, Lori and Chad wanted that. And then you add to it the personal connection with children who played with his own children. He knew these kids. He loved these kids. They were connected to his family that he was a part of. And so I am very pleased that the prosecutors are moving forward and giving him an opportunity to be heard. And that's what the system is about, is making sure that people who are wronged have an opportunity to be heard and an opportunity to seek justice against people who've harmed them. So kudos to Maricopa County.
Well said. And the common theme here is that, investigators believe that these two, Charles and Brandon, were identified as dark spirits and had sizable life insurance amounts for their beneficiaries. And behind all of these teachings were Lori and Chad talking about. I mean, even likening Brandon to Hitler. I mean, that was crazy to hear in testimony that that's the things were being said about him. So here we are with jury selection, and I've got to go to the judge, Mel McDonald here. Can we get a jury selected by Monday? We had two get, basically removed in the last trial. I mean, is this a little quick?
Yeah, I think there's a reasonable chance they will. You've got to be living on the moon if you're not familiar with what has gone on in this case. So I've got to believe a huge majority of the panel are going to have information. The critical fact is, will they be able to set aside anything they've read or heard and judge this case on the evidence? I might add that I think that this case, and Brandon and Rich, these folks were key to resolving all of these issues. There'd been a couple of murders before this. It had been documented that I think law enforcement considered were accidental or self-defense. Brandon's heroic identification, pursuing Cox for a short while, the information on the Jeep, all of these things, I think, brought home with Rich's oversight that we're dealing with people that are serial killers, not accidental individuals. So I'm thrilled to see Rich Robertson on this panel. He's an outstanding reporter, and I think he'll have some great insight.
Oh yeah, we've gone to know each other for the past 5 years, and it's always like, all right, let's catch up. Here we are for the next trial, for the next major development. Benjamin Taylor, thanks for joining us. Now, we were just talking about this earlier, the motion to disqualify Judge Boreski, who has been lauded for his patience and for how he's handled this case, and yet here is Lori again, second time asking him to remove himself, this time to be disqualified for personal bias. What did you think about her motion? And spoiler alert, I'll tell you right now, that was denied this morning by another judge who ruled over that motion and argument.
Yes, I mean, Lori's trying her best to throw spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. I mean, basically, you have to, when your life is on the line here and you're a criminal defendant, you try to do whatever you can. So right now, she's trying to get the judge off the case and try to say a different Judge, because Judge Boreski, he was the judge in her previous trial. So she's probably thinking, well, if I lost and got found guilty in my first trial, I'm going to lose again with the same judge in my second trial. So she's doing what she can. This is normal. Sometimes you do see this a lot where people try to get their defense attorney off, which she already did. She already fired her defense attorney representing herself. And now she's trying to get the judge off. So it's not really surprising, but it's very rare that you see a judge get out the case unless there's really some major conflict to get the judge off the case. So we kind of, like you said, Justin, we already knew that this motion will probably be denied, and it was denied, but here we are today, and she's going to try to do what she can to win this case. So that's one of her tactics, is try to get the judge off.
Yeah, Lori definitely keeps things interesting for us. I mean, we found out about this last-minute hearing at 9:30 this morning, and unfortunately, we couldn't get a pool camera ready for that. It lasted 11 minutes. I'll tell you guys, I literally walked into the hallway. Prosecutor Trina came out and told us, we're done. It was denied. So that was it. And then we've got the FTR hearing from the court. So I want to get this soundbite ready for you. Robert, our director, is going to play Daybell's argument to the judge regarding Judge Boreski. Take a listen.
An oral motion with Judge Boreski and asked him to recuse himself because of the bias and prejudice that I had seen during our last trial and throughout the whole entire time that he has been the judge over all of these cases. And he refused to do so. So I thought I needed to put it in writing and put all my points in that I felt like were causing him to be biased and prejudiced against me, and that obviously you've read it, so you've seen all the different things that I put. There was an actual comment during trial when I was cross-examining one of the witnesses where he said to me directly after an objection from the state that I was comparing myself to biblical prophets, which I absolutely was not doing, and I didn't even realize it until someone showed it to me on the FTR afterwards that he had even said that, because I was in the middle of questioning the witness. And so there's several times that he made comments directly to me. I tried to address this with him directly in our last hearing on May 14th, where I asked him why he had denied every single motion that I had ever filed in the last year and a half. And he said that my motions had no merit. I asked him if my prior defense team, that he denied all of their motions, that they had no merit as well. And then I asked him, my prior defense team before that, all the motions they filed were denied, and did they have no merit at all either? And I asked him again if he would recuse himself from this case so that I could get a judge that was impartial and fair and have a fair trial. That is my right, my Sixth Amendment right and my 14th Amendment right to have a fair trial, an impartial trial, and not a judge who has some kind of bias against me.
All right. Anything else? Thank you. Judge, just the prior.
So there you go. That was Lori Daybell's argument to the judge. And as we know, ultimately, no legal basis for that. She's just calling Boreski out, saying that, you know, he has some sort of issue with her and denies all of her motions. Rich, I want to go to you as the former reporter that would be in a courtroom like this and watching a defendant, and you hear all these stories about her, and you cover her, and just in that mindset, like, what is it about her that, I don't know, even just this terrible court video quality is something that's so fascinating about this case?
Well, it's certainly unique. I mean, I've had the perspective as a reporter sitting in the back of a courtroom observing these kinds of things. But more significantly, as a defense investigator, that's primarily what I do. I'm usually sitting at the defense table with people like Lori. And it gives you a different perspective, frankly. But the, you know, she's a pro per. She has no idea what the heck she's doing from a legal standpoint. I mean, I read through some of her motions. She just throws a lot of words on the paper. There's a lack of specificity. There's really nothing to a lot of this stuff that she's just, you know, you see this in a lot of the militia cases and things like that. They've heard all these legal terms, and they just kind of throw them into the paper and think that just by making an allegation that is the evidence, and it's not.
Rachel, you heard Lori's argument there, Sixth Amendment, 14th Amendment. From a legal perspective, What do you make of all of that and her argument as it relates to Boreski and his treatment of her during the last trial?
I think Rich hit the nail on the head. She's heard these terms, she's throwing it around, and I think she makes a common mistake that pro se, pro per people do, is they see it as sort of a 50-50 battle where they have to do, 50% of the time the judge should agree with me, 50% of the time they should agree with the state. And it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the way the system works. When someone is pro se, that doesn't mean they should win 50% of the time. This isn't gambling. This isn't bets. This is based on the reality of the law. And the law is the judges rule on the merits. There's no percentage or an under over on when you should win. The law is the law, and if motions do not have merit, it doesn't matter who files it, the judge denies the motion. And it's been very clear throughout this trial that the way that this judge has run his courtroom is based on the law. In fact, there are times where he has gone above and beyond to help this pro se defendant, and he's been extremely patient with her. So I get what she's doing. She has a fundamental misunderstanding, somehow seeing it as odds and a 50-50 shot. It's not. She doesn't understand the system. And once again, and I'll quote Judge Mel, Lori is her own worst enemy. It's exhibit 4022 of why Lori Vallow should not be her own lawyer.
And I know Benjamin and Judge Mel are ready to go and get their take, but I want you to listen to Trina Kay's response. Robert, let's listen to what the state had to say in regards to Lori.
Almost all exclusively dealt with motions to preclude the media. Judge Boreski applied the appropriate law in finding that the media had a right to be present and tried to limit it by saying things like they couldn't focus on the defendant's papers or things like that to mitigate any of the concerns by the defendant. All of the defendant's motions that she has filed have been without legal basis. They've been appropriately ruled on, and the state's motions that the state has won have been ruled on based upon, again, legal basis. So the fact, as the court is well aware, that the defendant has had all of the motions ruled against has no basis for bias if they're all been ruled on based upon the rules of law and the rules of evidence. So we see nothing that the defendant has provided here that would rise to a level to preclude or recuse Judge Boreski from this case.
Thank you.
Okay, Judge Mel, how do you rule on that? What are your thoughts? Well, I know your answer.
It take me about 1/50th of a quarter of a second to deny it. She is America's answer to the village idiot. She, the more she opens her mouth, the more she damages her case. I think sitting in front of a jury, they can see her emotions when she's trying to do the questioning. This has been such an eye-opener and so entertaining. In fact, I've almost become insomniac because I can't get this farcical presentation she does out of my mind. The judge was absolutely correct. I think she's doing it. She gets a lot of publicity. She gets her name in the paper. She gets to sound like a superstar, but she's a fool. And the ruling was absolutely correct that Judge Boreski's been unbelievably fair, has been over backwards to try to keep the case flowing. So it's a correct ruling.
Benjamin, I want to know what you think, but also, is this the time for her to testify in this trial? Like, we've talked about it. She's thrown everything at the wall. Why not? And she wasn't in Arizona at the time of the shooting, but we know they just have to prove that there was a conspiracy.
Yes, on the prosecutor has to prove there was a conspiracy. And why not have Lori Daybell get on the stand and testify? What does she have to look at, right? And depending on how this case goes and how the jury looks in a future case, I mean, why not? I think she should take the stand, look those jurors in the eyes, and tell them, you know what? I am not guilty. I was in a different state. I had nothing to do with this. I didn't try to shoot Brandon. Somebody else tried to shoot him. So I think, she has a chance if she picks a good jury. Right now, that's what the jury selection is about. Jury questionnaires. These are the people who are going to decide this trial. So this is one of the most important parts that she needs to start paying attention to, is these questionnaires and picking the right jury, because you just never know what might happen in jury selection and what happens in the jury. So she testifies in this case and looks at the jurors in the eyes. She might convince one or two people to say not guilty or a hung jury. So this is a different day, a new day for her. So we'll see what happens.
Wow. Okay, Rachel, I want to know, what's the impact of having a victim? We had this question from the chat, a victim that is alive, obviously was shot at, but having them on the stand for the jury, you know, the optics of that.
You know, I think when you have the person who can look the jury in the eye, juries take it very seriously. And then you add, when the victim is testifying and can talk from a place of authenticity about the trauma, about who was taken, about what they've been through, about what they had to live through and what their life has been like after, it really provides clarity to the jury about what happened and what real harm was done to the victim and the community and the system. There's very few things more powerful in a courtroom than a victim who can look them in the eye authentically, sincerely, and talk about what happened to them.
We know digital evidence is huge, and Rich, you know this because you were working on the case, but besides the Jeep, the suspect vehicle that we have photos of that was involved, the Tesla and the photos of the shattered window, body camera video of approaching Brandon at the scene, but really back in Idaho, I don't know if this gets brought out. I would assume the video of the storage unit where, you know, the back Jeep tire was wheeled in as this was happening, because we know that police say Alex Cox leaned over through the back of the trunk and shot out through the rear window. So taking out that rear wheel and then also taking out that like back seat, basically creating room and basically parking face to face with another car so that the rear of the Jeep was, you know, looking at the Tesla coming into the driveway. But what stands out to you in this where you really believed, okay, this was a plot to get Brandon?
Well, you know, there's a fundamental difference between the Charles Vallow case and this case. You know, there was no question about who shot Charles Vallow. That was not a whodunit case. You know, that was a whydunit case. This one is a whodunit case. It really is. It's a circumstantial evidence case. They're not putting Lori Vallow at the scene, and Brandon didn't see Alex Cox directly. He couldn't identify. He identified him circumstantially. He saw this Jeep that matched the description of one that he knew belonged to Charles, and all the events that surrounding it, all the things you're talking about. They're going to build a circumstantial case to put Alex Cox and that Jeep there, but they still have to link Lori Vallow to that shooting. And so the conspiracy is going to have to be in that digital evidence. It's going to be in communications between the parties involved in this. I mean, the reality is that Lori, in these kinds of instances, it's always who benefits is the question. Well, Lori Vallow wasn't going to directly benefit, or Lori Daybell. Mm-hmm. You know, Melanie was the one beneficiary. His wife was going to be the beneficiary of an insurance policy. So you've got to put this whole thing together from a circumstantial case that's very different than mm-hmm. what was in the prior cases as well.
So it does seem to be a little more challenging for the prosecution just on its face, because you don't have Lori at the scene smiling and laughing with officers and in the house when the person is shot at or shot. This is a different scenario here, but the communications in the storage unit could tell a story. But Judge Mel, we know Lori now through the way she conducts herself in the courtroom. Do you predict her to ask Brandon and Cross, did you see me conspire with my brother to kill you? Did you see me at your house in Gilbert? The very point blank obvious questions that she'll try to cast doubt for the jury.
I think if she had a competent defense attorney, you most certainly would see that kind of questioning. I think with Lori, heaven only knows what she will do or what she won't do. I think one thing that highlights this entire case, regardless of what happens, the Idaho convictions that Rachel and her team got, Laurie is never going to see the light of day again. Murder convictions consecutive without parole, that is most certainly going to be probably the Arizona sentence of Charles Vallow. So I like seeing this case because I think it gives Brandon Boudreaux an opportunity in Arizona to confront Laurie. But all of the circumstantial evidence, I think, is compelling. Very few people knew he was living there. His then estranged wife knew. With the Jeep, with the storage unit, these pieces of evidence are overwhelming. So whether she takes the stand or not, who knows? If she does, I think it would be an answer to prayer for the prosecutor. I would love to have somebody like Laurie on the stand. Then the trial may be going to August or September.
Wow. Now we got about 5 minutes left. I know, Rachel, you got a little bit of time with us, and thank you guys. But I want to ask you, Rachel, we know that Laurie wanted to call Melanie Gibb and Zulema Pastenes to the stand, and you got to wonder, well, how would that help her? And Judge Boreski said, how are they relevant? And she would not disclose what they mean to this case. We know how they were involved and what they know about Daybell's teachings as far as Chad and Laurie and what was being said in the whole inner circle. But what did you think about that? How would that move help her, even if they're allowed in?
Laurie has some wild theories, and you've got to remember Zulema and Mel Gibb and several of the witnesses that were in her circle were being fed stories about the dangerousness of those people who were dark. And some of them took actions about the danger of the people who were dark. And so I suspect she was going to, but didn't want to tell the judge this, that she was going to try to go off of one of her wild stories that she had fed to Mel or fed to Zulema and question them about that, and perhaps about what other people said about Brandon. Because Laurie's theory is that either A, the murder didn't happen, it has to be, or B, that Brandon was so dark that other people had a motive to kill him as well. I suspect she's being cute. She didn't think she has to tell the judge what her theory is. And in her failure to tell the judge, hey, other people might have wanted to kill him too, her refusal to do that cost her those witnesses. There's zero evidence, by the way, that any of that is actually true. But Laurie hasn't been hampered by the truth before, and this wasn't going to happen this time. So I think she was trying to get Zulema and Mel to put forward the wild theories that Laurie was trying to teach people, and her failure to put that forward to the judge made sure that the judge wasn't going to let that happen.
And then, real quick, Benjamin, if you were on the defense, what would you say?
I mean, basically, like we discussed earlier, I mean, you have to try to get as many witnesses as you can. In the first trial, she didn't have any witnesses, right? So she's trying to get some witnesses on the stand to kind of talk and explain away her lifestyle to help the jurors understand this. So I think Laurie has to, hopefully the judge will allow some witnesses for her to testify. And hopefully, like we said earlier, Laurie testifies and they believe her. And she gets one or two jurors to say hung or I'm confused here. She has a chance to, get a hung jury because she has nothing to lose. Again, she's already lost her previous trials. Why not take a swing at the bat and go to the stand and get as many witnesses as she can to testify?
All right, to our panel, Rich, Mel, Benjamin, Rachel, thank you so much for being here. That's really just the warm-up. We're going to hear more from you guys and see you guys throughout the week once opening statements begins. Your insight is very valued. Everyone here in the chat appreciates it also. So we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you.
All right. George, now I think this is always an interesting time because opening statements is one thing, but jury selection is the foundation of what is going to decide this case, the verdict. We love talking to jurors after trial's over. And we are going to basically be introduced to strangers for the first time that we may hopefully meet at the end of this.
Well, and we're obviously talking about strangers that we obviously are meeting for the first time. But the overwhelming question that we have from the very beginning in these cases, especially this one, is what did you know about it? They're going to be asked about it in jury selection. We're certainly going to ask them. The first question is, but how much did you know? You didn't know much. Well, now what are you learning? It was the first question we asked all three of the jurors that spoke to us right after the verdict was read in the last case. We talk a lot about digital evidence. We theorized with the jury in the last trials how many notes are they taking? How are they able to follow along with everything that's being thrown at them with the evidence? This case, as we've mentioned, seems a little more difficult for the prosecution in the fact that they maybe don't have as much digital and forensic evidence as they've had in the previous cases. I guess the silver lining is that they have the lone victim who survived and who has already testified in other cases against Lori. That may work in their favor, but the jury's going to have a lot to go through. And this doesn't seem, at least on the surface, as ironclad for a prosecution as the previous cases.
They need to believe that she knew what Alex was doing and that she actually not even led it, but was very aware of what the plan was, even from Rexburg, Idaho at the time. And even with storage unit video, if that is shown, doesn't mean that she knew what was happening. She could have been, let's put hypothetically doing a favor and putting this tire away, putting the back, but obviously Alex is placed at that storage unit too. So they're always together. So that story needs to be told of who Alex is to Lori.
And they're going to have to, again, be very precise in their argument, the prosecution, in their argument that, again, Lori had a hand in all of this because, again, the Jeep, they can link Alex to that. In that area around that time, the Jeep is the Jeep. I'm interested to see if any of the neighbors are going to be called to testify. Whether there's going to be home surveillance of the scene that we just aren't aware of at this time. There are going to be things I think that certainly paint a picture that Alex obviously was behind all of this. But like you said, how do they link Lori to it? I know there's obviously. It's out there that the internet searches and things like that. We know the discussions that were had about dark spirits and light spirits. I don't know that we can hear from our panel when this trial gets started. I'm not even sure that's enough to convince the jury that Lori thought that Alex would go this far to shoot Brandon. But I think the timeline, the fact that the shooting happened in October, obviously several months after the kids went missing and that Charles was shot and killed. I think maybe the jury might pick up on some of that if that's presented in court. But yeah, Trina is going to have her hands full with presenting the evidence in a way that the jury can understand what's going on, when it happened, and painting that, as we say in journalism sometimes, laying out the dots and seeing how the jury connects those dots, again, to link Lori to this crime.
It was so quick, though, like the series of events. It's July, move at the end of August. Kids go missing in September, but not announced missing until December. October already had happened and Brandon was shot at. Tammy is already dead. But we know that stuff from Idaho is not going to be brought in. And at first there was this motion to bring in the last conviction in the Charles Vallow case. I don't think that's happening. So they may not even learn about that. They could be very isolated to what happened to Brandon on October 2nd, 2019. All right, so we're going to wrap up here. Here's what's going to happen at 1 p.m. The review of jury selection questionnaires is going to begin, and they're going to strike people, people that know about the case or just, wouldn't be a good fit for this pool. That's going to be happening, and there's no camera allowed in the courtroom for this process of jury selection. But we will be in there to see what's going on, to watch Lori Daybell, conduct herself. We are working on right now, our web team, Ken Wong, is putting up the full hearing, 11 minutes of what happened this morning. It's the courtroom's video from their system, so you'll see more of that argument and Trina K's response again and what the judge ultimately said, Judge Jennifer Green said about this motion to disqualify Judge Boreski. We'll be watching Judge Boreski in just about an hour, and then tomorrow will be the pool of jurors that will be whittled down to the 16, 12, and then 4 alternates. Opening statements on Monday. We'll have our panel back. You guys subscribe, hit the bell for notifications because we'll be back here bright and early Monday morning, hopefully if we have a jury. If jury selection is still going on, you'll know about it. Stay with us for further coverage. Thanks you guys for watching.